Marcus Hale stepped off the shuttle onto the jagged cliffs of Theris, the wind biting through his jacket. The sky was dark with rolling storm clouds, and the scent of ozone stung his nose. Far below, the nesting grounds of the dragon mothers stretched across a valley of sharp black rock, their massive wings flashing like shadows in the storm. For centuries, humans had avoided this place. Most thought dragons untouchable, unknowable, and deadly. Marcus knew better. Humans had survived worse. Humans had adapted, and he had a plan. He tightened the straps of his pack and activated the small device on his chest, a neural resonator prototype. It could translate thought patterns into vibrations and light pulses. It had never been tested on a creature like Zyra, the dragon mother. She had lost her hearing years ago in a territorial fight. No human had ever communicated with her successfully. But Marcus had spent years studying dragon behavior, flight patterns, and their subtle gestures. He believed trust could be earned, even with a creature that towered over him and could crush him with a single swipe of her tail. The first step was simple: get close without being seen as a threat. Marcus edged along the cliffside, every sense alert. One wrong move could trigger a dragon's attack, and even the most experienced veteran could not survive an angry dragon mother. The wind tore at him, threatening to knock him into the jagged rocks below. He counted his steps, matching each carefully to the vibration of the resonator. The device hummed against his chest, sending small rhythmic pulses into the cliff itself, hoping the vibrations would carry upward. Above him, a juvenile dragon shrieked in alarm, its bright blue scales flashing in the dim light. Marcus froze. The creature's eyes locked on him, wings spread wide, talons clicking on the rock. He could feel its fear, raw and immediate. One instinctive thought raced through his mind: make it see you are not prey. He activated the resonator and adjusted the frequency, producing a low, rhythmic pulse that mimicked the distress signal dragons often use to warn each other. The juvenile froze, ears pivoting toward the signal, tail twitching nervously. Then with a sudden flap, it disappeared over the cliff edge. Marcus exhaled slowly, his heart pounding. One small success, but one step closer. He had only minutes before the mercenaries arrived. They had tracked Zyra's offspring for weeks, seeking to steal dragon eggs for profit. Marcus knew he had no time to waste. He scrambled up a narrow ridge, feeling the jagged rocks tear at his gloves and boots. Every step demanded concentration. He had to remain silent, yet move quickly. His body ached from the years of war, but adrenaline carried him forward. This was not a battlefield of guns and explosions. This was a test of courage, intelligence, and patience. Finally, he reached the edge of Zyra's cavern, a massive hollow carved into the cliff face, black as coal. The wind howled through the entrance, carrying the scent of sulfur and wet stone. Marcus stopped just inside the opening, scanning the shadows. The dragon mother's massive form lay coiled around her clutch, scales glinting with an unnatural dark sheen. Her eyes opened slowly, narrow and unreadable. She could sense him, but she did not move. Her tail flicked once, and Marcus felt the force of it ripple through the ground. He stayed perfectly still, letting her examine him. He activated the resonator and sent a pulse toward her, soft and rhythmic, meant to mimic the heartbeat pattern she would recognize from her own offspring. Zyra's massive head tilted slightly, nostrils flaring as she sniffed the air. Marcus could feel the tension vibrating through her body. Every muscle was ready to strike, yet she did not. 1 second stretched into 5. Marcus swallowed, feeling the weight of his own mortality. One mistake, one sudden movement, and he would not survive. Then a subtle response. Zyra's tail twitched once more, not in anger, but in recognition. A tiny flick, almost imperceptible, but it was a start. Marcus's chest tightened with hope and fear. The storm outside grew louder, thunder rolling across the cliffs like a drum. His mind raced. He needed to build on this, to prove that he meant no harm. His hands moved carefully, adjusting the resonator's frequency to match the rhythm of her breathing. The dragon mother's eyes followed the pulses, tracking each subtle vibration. From somewhere below, the first signs of the mercenary ships appeared, small glints of metal reflecting lightning, engines whirring as they approached the valley. Marcus glanced toward them, calculating how much time he had. Too little. Too far. But he could not retreat. Not now. Zyra's younglings needed protection, and no one else could reach her in time. He took a deep breath, feeling the storm whip around him, and prepared to take the next step, one that could either earn her trust or cost him his life. As he leaned closer, pressing the resonator against the base of her scales, he felt her eyes lock with his. For the first time, Marcus sensed a spark of understanding. A connection had been made, fragile but undeniable. The air between them seemed to hold its breath. Marcus knew this was just the beginning. He had survived battlefields across galaxies, but this was different. Here the stakes were not just life or death, they were trust, survival, and the fragile bond between human and dragon. And then, from the darkened cliffs, a low, menacing hum grew louder. The mercenaries were close. Marcus's pulse raced. Zyra stirred, protective and tense. The next move had to be perfect. One misstep and all would be lost. Marcus pressed his back against the cold stone wall of Zyra's cavern, listening to the low hum of approaching mercenary engines. His fingers tightened around the neural resonator, sending steady, reassuring pulses into her massive scales. Zyra's eyes flicked toward the sound, nostrils flaring. Her tail coiled like a spring, tense and ready. Marcus knew she could smell danger long before he could see it. He had to act fast. There was no time for careful planning now. Every second counted. The cliffside path down to the valley was narrow, jagged, and exposed. One misstep could send them tumbling into the jagged rocks below. The mercenaries were armed with energy nets and stun cannons designed to capture dragons alive. Marcus had survived wars, ambushes, and firefights, but nothing had prepared him for this. Facing a predator the size of a building, protecting its young, and relying on a fragile device to communicate trust. He gave Zyra a slow pulse through the resonator, matching the rhythm of her breathing. The dragon mother shifted slightly, a low rumble vibrating through the ground, a warning and acknowledgement at once. Marcus carefully led her toward the cliff exit, moving one cautious step at a time. The wind screamed around them, carrying clouds of sharp sand and hail. Marcus had to balance speed with caution. Any sudden movement could trigger Zyra's defensive instincts. The first obstacle came quickly. A narrow ridge jutting out over the valley below twisted sharply, slick with rain. Marcus placed his feet carefully, testing each hold. Zyra hesitated behind him, her massive claws scraping against the stone. The ground trembled under her weight. Marcus's heart pounded, and he adjusted the resonator to mimic the soft vibration of a dragon nest's heartbeat, a signal he hoped would calm her. Zyra's ears flicked, and she inched forward, following him without striking. Suddenly, a young sky dragon screeched from above, swooping low as if testing their courage. Marcus froze. The juvenile's eyes were bright, blue, and full of wild curiosity. One false move could provoke it into an attack. He activated the resonator quickly, sending a soft, staccato pulse designed to mimic a dragon's warning call. The juvenile froze mid-flight, wings beating in confusion, and then banked away, startled but unharmed. Marcus exhaled slowly, relief washing over him. One small victory, but he could not linger. As they approached a sheer drop, Marcus spotted movement below. Mercenary scouts moving along the valley floor, scanning with energy sensors. The humans were quick and ruthless. Marcus had no weapons capable of reaching them from here. He needed Zyra's help, but she had no reason to trust him fully yet. He tapped the resonator again, projecting pulses in sync with her tail flicks. The dragon mother paused, then obeyed, lowering her body slightly as Marcus guided her to a safe passage around the cliff edge. Every step was perilous. Rain slicked the rocks, and the wind threatened to push both human and dragon off balance. Marcus's muscles burned from the effort of climbing, balancing, and controlling the resonator. Sweat stung his eyes, but he could not stop. Behind him, Zyra's younglings huddled close, hiding in the shadows of the cliff recesses. Their tiny wings twitched nervously, and Marcus felt a surge of protective determination. He would not let harm come to them. Not today. A sudden crack split the air. A shard of rock broke from the cliff above, tumbling toward them. Marcus lunged, pushing the resonator against Zyra's side, sending a rapid vibration pulse that startled her into a controlled leap. They cleared the falling debris by inches. His lungs burned, his heart raced, but the narrow escape reinforced one truth: humans survived because they adapted. They solved impossible problems when failure meant death. They reached the edge of the cliffs overlooking the valley. The mercenaries were closer now, scanning for movement, their energy nets glowing ominously in the stormlight. Marcus could see Zyra's younglings, frightened but safe behind her wings. He knew he had to gain her full trust quickly. He stepped forward, placing both hands on her massive foreleg, letting her feel the rhythm of his pulse through the resonator. The vibrations matched her own heartbeat. He moved slowly, deliberately, signaling calm and reassurance. Zyra's eyes narrowed, then softened, a gesture of recognition. Marcus took a deep breath. The next step would be dangerous. The cliff narrowed to a single, jagged path, a bridge between safety and exposure. One slip and they could fall into the mercenary-controlled valley. Marcus's mind raced, calculating each step, every possible reaction from Zyra. He could feel the storm pressing in, rain lashing, wind howling, thunder shaking the rock. He didn't flinch. He could not. The survival of both human and dragon depended on his courage, his intelligence, and his ability to act without hesitation. The first mercenary scout spotted them, raising a weapon. Marcus's pulse quickened, but he remained calm, sending a sharp vibration through Zyra to signal an urgent leap. In one synchronized movement, Dragon Mother and Veteran vaulted across the narrow path, landing safely on the far side. The mercenary fired, but their aim was thrown off by the storm. Marcus looked up at Zyra, her massive wings quivering in anticipation. He could feel her tension, her trust, and her uncertainty. One mistake and all would be lost. As they paused to catch their breath, Marcus realized the mercenaries were regrouping, closing in from multiple directions. The storm offered cover, but only for a short time. He adjusted the resonator again, sending a pulse that was both warning and invitation. "Come with me, fight if you must, trust me." Zyra's head tilted, a small sign that she understood. Marcus's heart pounded. This was just the beginning. The real test, protecting the younglings and outsmarting the mercenaries, was yet to come. The wind screamed louder, the mercenaries' hum grew closer, and Marcus set his jaw. His next move would decide everything. He took a step forward, leading Zyra toward the narrow cliff trail, each heartbeat a drum of courage, each breath a promise to survive. And somewhere below, the mercenary ships began to hover, lights glinting, weapons primed. Marcus's eyes narrowed. The real danger had arrived. Marcus pressed forward along the narrow cliff, his boots slipping on slick stone as wind and rain battered him. Below, the mercenary ships hovered closer, engines whining, scanning for movement. Every instinct screamed danger, but Marcus had no time to hesitate. Zyra followed closely, muscles tense, wings twitching in anticipation. He could feel her uncertainty, her mistrust still simmering beneath the surface. One wrong step and both dragon and human could fall or worse be captured. He glanced at the resonator strapped to his chest. It pulsed steadily, translating his heartbeat and intent into vibrations along Zyra's massive scales. The Dragon Mother's eyes followed each signal, sharp and intelligent, trying to read the human beneath the device. Marcus had spent weeks mapping her reactions, studying how she responded to rhythms and patterns. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. He needed her to trust him completely. Without trust, the mercenaries would win. Ahead, the cliff narrowed to a jagged overhang that stretched across a deep chasm. There was no bridge, no handholds, nothing to cling to except sheer luck and balance. Marcus crouched, signaling Zyra through subtle vibrations. He matched the rhythm of her breathing, the pulse of her heartbeat, letting her know he was steady and that she could move. Zyra hesitated, her massive body trembling slightly. Marcus spoke aloud in soft tones, though he knew she could not hear the words. It was rhythm, patience, and empathy that mattered now. The first step onto the overhang was treacherous. Marcus felt the rock under his hands shift, tiny pieces crumbling away. He braced himself, testing each foothold. Zyra's claws scraped the stone, creating vibrations that could trigger rock slides. He sent a rapid pulse through the resonator, mimicking a call from her own younglings. The Dragon Mother paused, then followed his guidance, moving carefully. Together, human and dragon began their dangerous crossing inch by inch over the yawning chasm. Halfway across, a juvenile dragon swooped down from above, its wings slicing the stormy air. Marcus froze. The young dragon screeched, talons glinting, ready to attack what it perceived as a threat. He reacted instinctively, sending a sharp high-frequency pulse through Zyra. She shifted instantly, shielding him with her massive body. The juvenile, confused and startled by the coordinated human-dragon signals, veered off into the storm, unharmed. Marcus exhaled slowly, feeling a rush of adrenaline and relief. One problem solved, but more were coming. From the valley below, mercenary sensors detected movement. Blinding beams of light scanned the cliffs, searching for their quarry. Marcus knew the devices could jam the resonator, but he had calculated the timing. He moved swiftly, adjusting the pulse patterns to avoid interference. Zyra mirrored him perfectly, wings flicking, tail coiling with each beat. Their motions became synchronized, a strange harmony born of desperation and trust. Marcus realized something vital. Survival was no longer about strength or weapons, it was about connection. As they reached the far edge of the overhang, a sudden roar echoed across the cliffs. A mercenary scout, reckless and bold, had begun to climb the rocks behind them. Marcus had mere seconds. He took a deep breath, sending a rapid vibration pulse that was both warning and guide. Zyra froze mid-step, then launched herself, vaulting over a broken section of rock. Marcus followed, using his own momentum to leap, landing hard but safe. The scout's energy net whistled past them, snapping uselessly against the cliff wall. Marcus's heart pounded. One misstep could have ended everything. The cliff opened into a narrow passage leading toward a protected valley. Marcus glanced down. Below, the mercenary ships were positioning themselves, preparing to deploy nets and stun cannons. He had no heavy weapons, no reinforcements. Just his mind, his courage, and Zyra's reluctant trust. He adjusted the resonator, sending pulses that mimicked protective calls dragons use with their young. Zyra stiffened, then followed his lead, moving faster now, guided by his signals. Each step was tense, precise, a test of human ingenuity against impossible odds. Suddenly the storm worsened. Rain lashed his face, wind tore at his jacket, and lightning illuminated the valley, revealing multiple mercenary figures advancing toward them. Marcus knew they could not outrun all of them. He needed a plan, something clever that no brute force could accomplish. He scanned the rocks, the cliffs, the jagged terrain. The only advantage he had was the environment itself. A human mind could see patterns, exploit weaknesses, think faster than blind aggression. He began plotting, using the resonator to test Zyra's reactions to subtle shifts, to see how she would move in tandem with him. Zyra's eyes narrowed, flicking from him to the mercenaries below. Marcus sent a pulse, a warning and a guide. She hesitated, then angled her body to shield the younglings behind her. He felt a flicker of acknowledgement, the first real sign she understood the stakes, the danger, and the human at her side. Marcus's mind raced. The mercenaries were closing in, their hovercraft engines thrumming against the cliffs, but he had an idea. If he could lead Zyra across the narrowest part of the passage, he could trap the mercenaries in the terrain, turning the environment into a weapon. The first step toward the plan was to gain full control of Zyra's movements without forcing her. He pressed the resonator against her massive scales and synchronized every pulse with her heartbeat. Slowly, methodically, he guided her through a sequence of steps that would force the mercenaries to follow blindly or lose sight of them entirely. Zyra's trust was growing, subtle but real. Marcus felt a surge of hope. Humans had survived against impossible odds before, and they would do it again. As they approached the narrowest edge of the cliff passage, Marcus heard the first warning shots from below. The mercenaries were advancing faster than he expected. He signaled Zyra urgently, adjusting the resonator to an accelerated rhythm. Her wings quivered, muscles taut. Marcus's pulse raced in perfect sync with her heartbeat. One last leap, one precise moment of trust and courage, and they could turn the tide. Marcus looked into her dark, intelligent eyes and whispered softly, though she could not hear the words, "We survive together. We can do this." The storm roared around them, and Zyra shifted, ready to follow his guidance. Marcus took a deep breath, preparing to make the move that would define their survival. And then, just as they stepped onto the cliff's narrowest edge, the first mercenary net fired, slicing through the stormlit air toward them. Marcus's heart pounded as the mercenary net shot toward them, cutting through the stormlit air like a deadly snake. He barely had time to react. Without thinking, he slammed the resonator against Zyra's foreleg, sending a sharp, urgent pulse. The dragon mother's eyes widened, then narrowed in understanding. With a forceful flap of her wings, she launched herself upward, muscles coiling like springs, tail whipping to steady her massive frame. Marcus clung to her scaled side, feeling every powerful heartbeat, every flexing muscle. The net passed harmlessly beneath them, slicing through empty air. Below, the mercenary scout ships wobbled, their engines straining against the wind and rain. Marcus saw their aim falter, their carefully calculated plans unraveling. He had no weapon to fight them directly, but human ingenuity had always found a way. He scanned the cliffs, lightning flashing across the jagged terrain. A narrow ledge jutted out above the mercenary line. If he could lure Zyra across it, they could collapse part of the cliff, blocking the ships and giving the younglings a chance to escape. "Hold steady," he whispered, though Zyra could not hear. His pulse through the resonator shifted to a steady, commanding rhythm, guiding her movement. The dragon mother hesitated, muscles coiled, eyes darting toward the advancing nets. Marcus kept his focus sharp, signaling her with precise vibrations. Trust was fragile, but it had been earned in tiny increments over the last tense hours. Now it was everything. Zyra leaped, clearing the narrow ledge with a grace no human could match. Marcus adjusted his balance, gripping the resonator and her scales. As they landed, he triggered a small device in his pack, a magnetic pulse mine designed to destabilize metal. The cliff shuddered, loose rocks tumbling down toward the mercenaries below. The ship's sensors flared and blinked, failing as their nets were shredded by the falling debris. Marcus's heart raced, but he kept guiding Zyra, timing every movement with the storm, every step with her wings and tail. Below them, the mercenary captain cursed, gesturing wildly as his team scrambled to recover. Marcus realized the enemy was smart, but no machine could match human creativity under pressure. He studied the terrain, calculating angles, momentum, and weight. Another pulsed through the resonator, and Zyra shifted instinctively, lowering her body to create a ramp for Marcus to jump across a broken rock shelf. He vaulted, landed, and immediately sent a pulse commanding Zyra to protect the younglings clustered behind her. The Dragon Mother obeyed perfectly, coiling around them like a living fortress. The mercenaries fired again, energy bolts streaking toward them, but the rocks Marcus had loosened created shields, deflecting most of the blasts. He grabbed a jagged boulder, calculating the trajectory, and hurled it with all his strength toward a hovering scout ship. The impact rocked the vehicle, sending it careening into the cliff wall. Marcus did not pause to celebrate. He had only moments to act before the remaining mercenaries regained composure. He guided Zyra forward with steady, commanding pulses. She moved with purpose now, understanding fully that survival required cooperation, that humans and dragons could act as one. One of the mercenaries managed to fire a net bolt that wrapped around Zyra's foreleg. The Dragon Mother roared, the sound echoing like thunder through the cliffs. Marcus acted instantly. He tapped a rapid pulse into the resonator, signaling urgency and direction. Zyra responded, rearing back and twisting, pulling free just as the net snapped and fell to the ground. Marcus's pulse matched her frantic rhythm, calming her momentarily. He felt her trust deepen with each maneuver, fragile but undeniable. The final challenge came as the remaining ships tried to flank them, cutting off any retreat. Marcus's mind raced. He could not outrun them, but he could outthink them. He scanned the cliffs, noting weak points, unstable ledges, and overhangs. Another pulsed through the resonator, and Zyra's massive wings beat with precision, nudging loose rocks and boulders toward the approaching hovercrafts. One by one, the mercenaries' vehicles faltered, engines failing as the terrain became an obstacle too deadly to navigate. Marcus had turned the environment into a weapon, a combination of human cunning and dragon power. With the enemy temporarily halted, Marcus took a deep breath. He pressed the resonator along Zyra's scales in a pattern meant to soothe, to reassure, and to guide. The Dragon Mother's wings arched, protecting the younglings completely. Marcus could feel her muscles relax slightly, tension giving way to trust. The storm still raged, but the immediate danger had passed. His pulse through the device slowed, matching her steadying heartbeat. He looked down at the valley. The mercenaries were regrouping, but the cliffside destruction, combined with Zyra's protective positioning, had bought them time. The Dragon Mother shifted, nudging Marcus gently with her massive snout. A gesture of gratitude. A recognition. Marcus felt a surge of emotion. He had crossed worlds, risked life after life, and here it was, a connection beyond species, forged through courage, intellect, and sheer determination. Marcus exhaled slowly. The storm's fury still threatened, the mercenaries were not gone, but he had achieved the impossible. He had protected the Dragon Mother's young, defied overwhelming odds, and proved the value of human ingenuity. The resonator hummed softly, echoing the rhythm of Zyra's heartbeat. In that rhythm, Marcus realized something profound. Humans survived not because of strength alone, but because of their ability to think, to connect, and to act where others feared. He glanced at Zyra's younglings, eyes wide but safe. He patted her massive foreleg, sending a final pulse, a signal of alliance. Zyra blinked, low rumble vibrating through her chest, and Marcus knew the moment would be remembered, not for weapons or war, but for courage, trust, and human determination. Then, above the storm clouds, lightning struck, illuminating the valley. The mercenaries were far enough to regroup, but Marcus's next move would decide whether they survived entirely. He met Zyra's gaze, pulse steady, ready. One final step remained, their escape from the storm and the mercenary threat entirely. And Marcus knew that the most dangerous part was still ahead. Marcus's pulse still raced as the storm began to ease. The rain had slowed to a drizzle, and the thunder now rolled like distant drums. Zyra's wings stretched wide, glinting wet black in the fading light, her younglings huddled safely beneath her protective shadow. For the first time in hours, Marcus allowed himself a moment to breathe. They had survived the mercenaries, the cliffs, and the storm. But survival alone was not victory. Trust had been forged here in the eye of chaos, and Marcus understood its weight. He stepped closer to Zyra, placing his hand gently against her massive foreleg. The resonator pulsed softly, now a rhythm of reassurance rather than warning. Zyra's eyes, sharp and intelligent, studied him. Her massive chest rumbled, low and steady, a sound that vibrated through the ground. Marcus smiled faintly. That rumble was her acknowledgement. She had heard him, not in the way humans hear words but in a deeper sense. He had communicated courage, understanding, and respect. In return she had recognized him as an ally, not a threat. The younglings stirred, wings fluttering nervously. Marcus crouched down, extending his hand toward them. They sniffed, wary, but Zyra nudged them forward. One tiny dragon approached, brushing against Marcus's fingers, scales surprisingly soft. He felt a surge of warmth. Humans were often called fragile, weak, or insignificant in the face of cosmic dangers. Here, standing on a storm-battered cliff beside a dragon mother and her brood, Marcus knew otherwise. Intelligence, courage, and empathy, these were humanity's weapons. And they had worked. Below the cliffs, the mercenary ships had withdrawn, engines whining, smoke rising from damaged hulls. Marcus had bought time not with firepower but with wit and daring. Every pulse, every careful movement had been calculated to turn the environment and Zyra's instincts into allies. He had acted as a bridge between species, using nothing more than human determination and courage. It was a reminder, humans could face odds that seemed impossible and emerge victorious, not through raw strength alone but through ingenuity and heart. Marcus finally allowed himself to look back at the path they had taken. Jagged cliffs, slick with rain and torn from falling rocks, bore the marks of their struggle. Each step had been life or death. Each pulse through the resonator had been a choice between trust and fear. And yet, here they stood, alive, together, a testament to human resilience. Zyra shifted, lowering her massive body to the ground, a gesture of rest and safety. Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the tension finally drain from his muscles. He knew the dragon mother would remain wary, but the bond they had forged was unshakable. For the first time, humans had proven to her species that they could be allies, protectors, and thinkers capable of understanding what raw instinct alone could not. Marcus looked out across the valley. The storm had cleared enough for dawn to break, rays of pale light cutting through lingering clouds. Zyra's younglings ventured cautiously from beneath her wings, exploring the cliff edges, their curiosity tempered by caution. Marcus smiled faintly. Survival was not enough, he wanted them to thrive. And with Zyra's newfound trust, humans and dragons could begin to coexist, cautiously but respectfully. The veteran felt a tug at his heart. Years of war, loss, and endless missions had taught him one thing. Courage without purpose is fleeting, but courage for others, empathy, action, intelligence, could shape worlds. Zyra had given him that proof. He had not only saved her young, he had earned the respect of a species thought forever alien. And in doing so, he had reminded himself what humans could accomplish when they refused to yield. He tapped the resonator one last time, sending a steady, calm pulse. Zyra leaned slightly against him, a gesture of trust and acknowledgement. Marcus allowed himself a small laugh. It was a sound that had no danger, no urgency, just relief. Around them, the cliffs seemed quieter now, the storm dissipating entirely. The danger had passed and the bond they had formed would endure. The mercenaries would return someday, he knew, but Marcus was ready. Humans had survived far worse, and now they had an ally no enemy could easily overcome. Zyra had seen their courage firsthand. She had recognized the intelligence and bravery that defined humans. That realization, Marcus knew, would change everything, not just for him but for every human who would come to Theris after him. He looked at the young dragons exploring cautiously around their mother. Their small wings flapped against the wind, uncertain but alive. Marcus felt an unspoken promise form between them. Humans would protect what needed protecting even when it seemed impossible. Zyra's low rumble echoed that promise in her own way. For the first time in decades, a dragon mother had heard a human, and chosen to trust him. Marcus Hale stood tall, exhausted but unbroken, watching dawn break over the cliffs. In the silence after the storm, he felt the truth of humanity in his bones. Courage could bridge worlds, intelligence could save lives, and determination could forge bonds no force could break. The storm had passed, but the legend of their survival, the bond of human and dragon, would remain. Marcus knew that when humans and dragons met again, they would not be strangers. They would be allies united by respect, courage, and the audacity to face the impossible together. And as the first light of day touched the scales of Zyra and her younglings, Marcus understood something deeper than survival. Humans could shine even against the impossible. They could reach across worlds, connect hearts, and change fates. Today they had done exactly that.